Okay, well, thank you for staying, and thank you for your movie. It is extraordinary.
Thank you so much, and thank you for doing this.
And also thank you for being named Madeleine.
You too. It's such a unique name.
So you were originally going to make a movie, an entirely different movie, about the woman who is featured in your movie who wrote the memoir, Hyun-Sun Lee. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Close, yes. So, and it's turned into this other movie. How did that happen?
Yeah. So initially, I was approached by my producers. They had acquired the rights to Hyun-Seo Lee's memoir, The Girl with Seven Names, and she had defected more than 20 years previous. I read it. It was, haunting. It was beautiful. It began to open up a world that I didn't really know. And what it really did was it, intrigued me to look further. And I started to do a deep dive into research with, reading everything I could get my hands on and watching everything. And I did this very intense several month-long search into the internet using VPNs and searching in different languages. Because I found that I could find out different things about North Korea depending on where I searched from, what language I searched in. And I discovered a couple things. I discovered, first off, that we don't hear from the people of North Korea. I discovered that I could barely find anything that gave voice to the 26 million people inside that country. I also discovered hidden camera footage that was being shot by extremely brave North Koreans who were literally risking their lives, shooting out of paper bags and in their sleeves and stuff, to bring the truth of their country out, or to smuggle it out to the outside world. And so the gulf between the fact that we didn't hear from the 26 million people, and yet I was feeling the heartbeat and seeing the reality of these people, made me at a certain point, and this was like after 3 or 4 months of research, say, this movie has to be made. Like it's an outrage that we haven't heard this. And at that point, I knew, yes, Hyun-Seo would be a part of this, but I also knew I wanted to go into a really deep dive with the film and a present tense story with the film.
But you needed characters.
Yeah.
As we say in the biz. You needed people to anchor your story. How did you find them?
Well, I started off, shooting with Hyun-Seo in South Korea, and she agreed. She knew that I wanted some present tense, something. Really, what I wanted was to try to follow an escape, which sounded so insane at the time. And she and I would brainstorm. The idea initially was to kind of couple her with that, and her story. What I was shooting with her was really. It was more of a psychological thriller about what it is like to live as one of the most high-profile defectors in the world who was speaking out against the regime and had been a target of the regime. And so it was sort of this deep, dark, belly of Seoul, South Korea. That was her side. And then I was always looking for something else. And I think my second or third trip to Seoul, I read something about Pastor Kim, and I knew I had to seek him out. And the irony is that it turned out that once I met him, which took many months for he and I to get to know each other and decide to work together, but once I met him, I realized that actually some of the hidden camera footage I had been finding on the web actually came from his network, but I hadn't known that. And so he opened things up into a whole another world.
Right. And he connected you to these two stories.
Yeah, so when he and I decided to work together, which again took many months, because he's very protective, as he should be, of his network and of the people he's trying to help. But once he and I got to know each other and realized that we really were interested in kind of making the same kind of movie, he and I both agreed that we should follow two stories, two attempted escapes, and these were the two groups who contacted him after that. There were no other ones that we followed.
So you didn't know how it would turn out, obviously, when you began shooting.
No. We didn't know how it was going to turn out at all. And that was the other thing. Not only did we not know how it was going to turn out, we didn't even know if we'd be able to use the footage because with the Rowe family, for instance, the brother, Hak Chang, who had already defected, he's in the movie, was living in South Korea. He gave initial, consent to Pastor Kim for the network to follow their story. But we were never going to use their story without them giving consent. So my producers went crazy when I told them that, yes, we're going to shoot this movie, but if the Rowe family decides, at any point that they don't want to be in this, we have nothing. Mm-hmm. So it was really everybody, and Pastor Kim talks about this very beautifully, like everybody had to kind of risk, so much. And in the end, it's what brought us together and made us, these people now are like family to me, and I think, they'll be a part of my life forever. Really? But we had no idea.
How do you communicate?
We communicate, I've learned some Korean, and actually Soyeon, the mother, is learning English rapidly. The Rowe girls, my daughter has been teaching them English. And then we communicate through there's a couple of translators who are part of our team, who are with us all the time. Because Pastor Kim and Soyeon have been in the United States most of the last 2.5 months with us.
Did they ever worry about your filming putting them in greater danger?
Yeah, so from the very beginning, that was, a mandate of mine and Pastor Kim's, that we would do nothing that would put them at any further risk than where they were already. And, that's why, for instance, in China, none of us went into China, obviously. China, as you know, is complicit with North Korea in many, many, many ways. Even Pastor Kim doesn't go into China. He hasn't been in China since 2009 because he had been warned that he could be kidnapped into North Korea. So in China, it was only Pastor Kim's network shooting with flip phones. And Pastor Kim actually his network always actually shoots a little bit, not like what we did, but it's not anything new for his network to be shooting because he is documenting stuff along the way just for his network to take in and out of North Korea, because the belief is that education, like getting the truth of North Korea out and also getting the truth of our world in is going to be the way ultimately to bring change in North Korea.
And aside from your movie, how is that information getting out?
You mean, so the way the information is getting out, well, our movie is, really the biggest way so far. I got this information by doing this incredibly intensive dive into everything North Korea for months. But for any of us, on our news, basically we see what the Kim regime wants us to see. We see news about the missiles and the parades, and no, we don't see any of this. So this film is definitely one of the main things that is hopefully going to get stuff out. There are people, like I said, shooting this hidden camera footage, and a lot of it's in the film, but that footage isn't necessarily getting to people. In terms of what's getting in, there's a lot of NGOs in South Korea, and several of them are run by defectors, and their whole goal is to get, flash drives in to teach North Koreans about the reality of the outside world, because North Koreans are taught that, they live in the center of the universe, that they are, yes, their lives are hard, full of hardship, and they know their lives aren't easy, but they believe that the rest of the world is actually worse off than them. Other than North Koreans who happen to live along that 800 plus mile border with China, who may get a signal here and there, most North Koreans live inland. They don't know anything about the outside world. And so they do assume the outside world is worse off. So a lot of defectors, there's a lot of projects that are sending flash drives, and they used to send VHS tapes and things like that. But one of the things that North Korean soldiers and guards do, they will, there's not much electricity in North Korea, but also what they will do strategically is turn off the electricity in, let's say, a neighborhood, go into a home. They don't have to ask. Go into a home. And if you were watching a VHS tape, your electricity is off. You can't get that tape out.
Oh, my God.
And they go in to find those tapes. And if you're caught with a tape, that's it. So that's why they started moving to flash drives. So
But do they have the internet?
no.
No access at all.
No. They now have something called the intranet. Like they're trying to do their own version of, sort of, not really, but like of social media, but not, no, they do
But the
not.
regime does.
The regime does, yes. But no, they do not have internet at all. No.
So here we are all wondering how they were able to hack Sony. And
Well, that's the regime. The regime has
so
everything.
they're very sophisticated. A very small group of people were able to do that.
Yeah, they have very skilled people in that.
So there's a very poignant moment in your movie where you're interviewing the grandma and you're asking her about Kim Jong-un, and she is struggling, and then she says he's a great man, and her daughter says, "Come on, stop with the propaganda." But at that moment, she really did feel that, right?
Yeah.
And so, what was it like trying to convince her, meeting her, that you weren't part of the Great Satan, that you weren't going to kill her as an American?
It was amazing. It was unbelievable. I mean, and there's so much more footage, of that time. Because in Laos, because we were able to go to Southeast Asia, we were not able to go to China, obviously. But Laos was the first time that we were able to kind of sit down for a few days. And the footage is unbelievable with all of them, but with Grandma. But that was such an incredible experience because, she had, for 80 years, been told that we were the enemy. And she believed it, and she still believed it. And so what we were witnessing was, her grappling with what she has known to be true, literally in her bones known to be true, which is that we are not only the enemy of North Korea, but that we only exist to hurt North Korea. We don't really exist as individuals. We don't really care about anything other than that. And she's known that to be true. And then kind of seeing her and experiencing her grapple with that vis-a-vis her own experience over time with us was unbelievable. And, that is something else that is unprecedented in this film. And at the time, we knew how crazy this was, this clash of not just cultures, but ideologies, mythologies, because most people who meet defectors, they meet them after they've been through this process of, because if you do get to Thailand and you do get to South Korea, you have to go through several months of proving that you're North Korean, because the South Korean government doesn't want, a Vietnamese person to pretend they're North Korean to gain South Korean citizenship. So you have to prove you're North Korean. If you prove you're North Korean, then you go to another facility where you live for many months to learn about the outside world, learn what an ATM is, and all sorts of things. And usually people would meet them after that. So we met them just, literally weeks after they had crossed the river into China. And most of the 2 weeks before we met them, they were hiding in this hut in China. So literally psychologically, we kind of met them like a day after they left North Korea. Yeah.
So had they not met that farmer, what would have happened to them? And they were just wandering around for days, not knowing where they were in China.
Yeah.
How were they surviving? And
they were barely surviving. And because when they fled, as you saw in the film, because they knew that they were on a list and they were going to be banished. And they knew that was the end for them. Mm-hmm. And so for them, it was like, well, we have to go. But they didn't know what China was. They didn't know, some defectors who I've spoken to have the, idea that if you cross the river, then suddenly you're free. The Rowe family didn't think that, but they didn't know where they were, or what was ahead of them, or what these other countries even were. They didn't know the geopolitical situation at all. If they had not met that farmer, probably they would have been caught or, sold by a broker, but they really weren't a great, brokers do sell young women into prostitution, into marriage with, because in northeastern China, there's a lot of men, farmers, men living, and there's not a lot of women. There's the one-child policy and all that. And so a lot of North Koreans are sold to marriage, they're sold into prostitution, they're sold into sex chatting and that kind of thing. But with the Roe family, probably they would have been caught and
sent back. And what would have happened to the little kids?
Oh, they would have all been in a
labor camp?
In a prison camp, yeah. I mean, there's a slight chance maybe that kids would have been out, but probably not. Probably not.
Wow.
Which means it's a death sentence.
So it's incredibly lucky.
Incredibly lucky.
How many families are like them who are not incredibly lucky? How many people try to make it and don't?
What's really hard is we don't have exact numbers because the only numbers we have are those who make it. Because we don't know how many people are going across the river. We know that with Kim Jong-un, because he has amped up security so much on the river, and started a shoot to kill order also on the river. So we know that less people are defecting, but we don't know how many have made it across. It's estimated to be, in the hundreds of thousands. And the crazy thing is that, because some people that are hiding in China, because, not everyone is caught. Maybe the Roe family would not have been caught, but a family of 5 people, that's very hard to hide over time. But what's really horrible, and the Chinese government is so much a part of this, but if you're, let's say, a woman who comes over the river, let's say you get sold into marriage, it doesn't matter if you have 5 kids in China. You're married to a Chinese man, let's say. You have 5 kids, you've lived there for 30 years, you will never have citizenship. You will 30 years later, if your husband's mad at you, if your neighbor is mad at you, they can turn you into the police and you will be repatriated. Regardless of your children get Chinese citizenship, but you will never get it.
Wow.
So they don't know how many, but estimated to be hundreds of thousands.
And it's been more difficult during and after the pandemic, right? China's really cracked down.
Yeah, so we were actually in South Korea when the pandemic hit, and I was shooting one of the cameras with Pastor Kim when he was getting those calls. And the China was paralyzed, right? Nobody could move through China. Even we couldn't move through China, let alone a defector. So defectors who had been hiding there for a year, a month, a day, they couldn't move. And because the river was shut down, really clamped down, it was basically impossible to, and you wouldn't even necessarily want to go across the river and just be in a paralyzed China. So everything stopped. The network fell apart. The part of the network that, does it only for money looked for jobs elsewhere. The part of the Underground Railroad that does it for the cause and is part of the, more of the missionary type work, they also had to find other means and other ways to other things to put their attention to. So everything was broken down, but over the last 10 months or so, the network has been slowly rebuilt, and routes have been rediscovered because the routes are always changing. And Pastor Kim actually just helped 4 people out in August, and a week and a half ago he was here, but then he was in Southeast Asia a week and a half ago with another group who he was helping out. Wow. But those are the first ones since our
How many
film.
Pastor Kims are there? It seems like there needs to be more than just one.
Yeah, there are some other organizations doing this, but he's one of the primary ones. There are some churches in South Korea. Everything is funded by donations, these escapes. So there are other churches in South Korea that do some of this work, but I would say he's the most prominent. And then there's an organization called Liberty in North Korea who helped us a lot with this film, and they also help people. So there are others, but it's few and far between.
And what is the attitude of the South Korean government to his work and to this work of trying to get North Koreans to come? Are they welcoming that or not
so the
much?
South Korean government, it varies administration to administration. The current government is, very aligned with the United States and Japan. They're taking a much harder line or policy against North Korea, but the previous government was sort of trying to placate North Korea. And when Soyun's son was sent back, it was the previous government. There is a chance that this government might have appealed to China for him because he was a minor. Whatever, the Moon government did not. But it really varies administration to administration. But also the people of South Korea, you know, there's some people who welcome North Koreans and see them as, you know, they are the same people. They've been separated for a long time, but they are the same people. And there are other people who don't want to be bothered, you know. And definitely North Koreans, a lot of defectors have a hard time assimilating to life in South Korea. Like the Roh family is kind of the luckiest of the lucky because they came as a family and they succeeded. But most defectors come as one person or maybe two, but more likely one, and they're leaving family behind. And then to find themselves in South Korea unable to communicate with your family, you know, not understanding a lot of the culture, and depending on your age, not even necessarily being able to find a way to live. Like Soyun, the mother, she's been an activist since before we met her. She works with single moms and women over the age of like 45 who are coming, defectors who are coming to help them assimilate. And the mother of the Roh family is actually training to be a social worker to do the same thing because defectors, a lot of them have a really hard time.
So Soyeon, I was wondering, she lost her son and she lost her mom, really. She lost closest people to her. Does she have any regrets that she defected?
She doesn't have regrets that she defected because, I mean, when she first went over the river, she was not intending to defect. She was intending to find a way to smuggle goods into North Korea because a lot of women do that, and women are more responsible for supporting the family in North Korea than men are. And since the 90s, the market economy in North Korea has women are basically the ones who are smuggling goods in for this market. So she did not mean to defect. When she was caught and put in prison, when she got out 2 years later, she was shunned. She was really not able to see her son or her mother or anyone. And so she kind of had no choice. So she doesn't regret that, but she does feel, I mean, she says she feels like a sinner, you know, just for what happened to her son. The fact that she couldn't rescue him. And she's, you know, she's been an activist for a long time. She's been known, all of these people have been known by the regime for a long time. But what's going on with her son in this film has reactivated her, and she's doing a lot of work protesting against the Chinese government, the North Korean government, and that activism that she's involved with now makes her feel connected to her son. It's like her lifeblood right now.
Well, let's end on an up note. That is an up note. I mean, it's positive that she's turning this into action. But tell us about the family, the Roh family, and how they're doing. The girls, especially.
Yeah, so they're actually all doing really well. Mom, I said, was, you know, she's studying to be a social worker. She's actually going to be in LA. In 2 weeks? No, in less than 2 weeks. Dad is working in a tofu factory. Grandma is doing really well. She's living with Huck Chang, her son. She is having some memory issues, but she's doing really well emotionally and enjoying her life. And the girls are really loving it. And the youngest one is becoming a very accomplished concert pianist. But they're both doing really well in school. And yeah, they're doing, I mean, they are, as I said, the luckiest of the lucky.
Well, we're lucky to have you and lucky to see this movie. And thank you so much. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Tell all your friends to go see it.
Thank you so much for coming. Oh,
Thank you.
and we're opening in theaters on Friday.
Oh, yeah. So go see it again.
If you know
Tell
anyone you
your
think
friends.
might want to see it, we're opening. It's a very small, limited release, but we are opening.